So I'd like to bring up Greg Vassmer from Trostel. Greg is the Chief Technology Officer from Trostel, and he's going to talk a little bit about Drumbeat meetings. And you may say, well, why are we going to talk about Drumbeat meetings? Because a meeting is a meeting. And what I witnessed in this organization is a meeting is not just a meeting. In this organization, what they do on a weekly basis was transforming even to our organization in terms of how we run our meetings. And it's kind of like the lifeblood in terms of what you do. So Greg, can you educate them a little bit on what your drum meetings do for your organization? Greg.
Thank you, Troy, very much. As he said, my name is Greg Vassmer. I am Chief Technical Officer for Trostel. And a lot of you may not know Trostel. We are a leather manufacturer back from 1850s time frame. But like all leather manufacturers, you have to do something when leather no longer is interesting for people to buy. And so when they went into rubber molding in the 50s, joined a lot of the people that were going to, a lot of the companies that were going to rubber for cars and things like that. And for about the last 20 years, we've been selling some excess compounding and mixing capability that we have to the outside world, such that today we do about half rubber molding and about half compounding and mixing. And it's an interesting change in the environment for us because now it really represents sort of two completely different companies. And when we joined the ARPM, Troy and Letha asked us if we could open up our factories to have people come out and visit. So about 2 months ago, we had the ARPM, one of their factory tours, and a plug for Troy and the group. It really makes sense from a receiving point of view to have people come in and critique and talk about your factory. We really got a lot out of it, and the team really gets motivated by it. But he noticed a couple of things he wanted to talk about out of all the things we talked about over several hours with them. And so these are two of them, and I've tried to blend them together. They're a little bit separate items, but we have sort of a common thread in here. So as we do this TED Talk style meeting, we have to talk about our problem first. And in our case, our problem really is one of how do we maintain the reputation that we've established now in the last 20 years in this compounding and mixing area, where we've really seen really excellent growth. While the molding business has done what the rubber molding business has, our compounding and mixing has really sort of taken off. Well, on the left side up there, you can see the kinds of things that we're expected to do by our markets. We're automotive, industrial, off-highway. They have big demands. We're a small company. We're not like some of these big guys who have staff to do this stuff. And so we are currently able to meet these kind of criteria. In order to do that, we have three main thrusts in the way we work. One is that we have to have quick and agile processes, okay? And maybe you've heard that a million times, but what it means to us is agile processes and having processes means that you define a development process or an engineering change process, or you might have a corrective action process that everybody knows the same way. So you're not having to dream about it. When the problem comes in, the guy gets it and he says, shit, how do I take care of that? And he goes over and he asks somebody and they concoct something that maybe gets it done, maybe doesn't. We don't. Everybody gets the training and knows how to do it. But if you imagine if you're doing the same thing all over the place, you have to make sure that they stay on track, and that's where this drumbeat discussion is going to come in. Okay, second thing we have to have is we have to have the data. So we gather a lot of data. There's a lot of linkage in the data in the organization from one end to the other, and I'll talk a little bit about what we do to try to address that issue. And then the last is you have to have a culture that allows people to say what's going on. If they have an issue or a problem, it can't be that they're going to feel attacked by it. And we had a fantastic talk this morning that really took us around that. So if I focus first on this drumbeat that we have established, we have in the organization all these well-defined processes. We have lots of engineers. They all really want to do it. Nobody is going out of their way to do things incorrectly or doing it on purpose. So we have to get them to do the checklists and things they have to do on a day-to-day basis. And we do that by having on a regular basis a meeting of the middle-level management where they're not even sure what's going to happen in the meeting from 24 hours before, because the project leaders have this group that they can go to bring their questions and to get the next direction or to overcome some obstacles that they have in their process. And so it works a little bit like this, that on any given day, the engineers or some new work comes in, or an engineer has something to do, and they have a checklist they're supposed to follow, and eventually they're going to want to spend some money. All right, and so we don't want them just spending money without somebody else checking on them. And plus, we want the whole organization to be sort of pointing in the same direction for that. So if we look at this next one, what we've done is at 11:30 every day, we get together, the entire middle management, right? They meet for 30, 45 minutes, and they're going to do this whether there's one thing to talk about or sort of 100 things to talk about. It consists of all of the functions that are in the factory that you might need to make a business decision about something. Okay, so to make to go through the activities they're talking about, if we get in a new request for a quote, who should get that job, right? Who should we assign to it? What kind of work should they do? If I have a corrective action, well, who should get back to the customer? If I have a new development that has a certain we're at a certain gate in the process, what kind of a checklist should this guy be filling out, and when should it be done by? So this group they have a leadership person. In one part of the business, we have the product development person, the manager that leads it, and the other part of the business, the mixing and molding, the mixing compounding part, we have the quality manager lead that. And what he does is he sees what comes in. So if something new comes in, it goes to him. If something needs to be worked on, or if some decision needs to be made, or some roadblock overcome, it comes to him. The engineers don't have to guess what to do. The whole team is aligned. All of the management knows what's going on, and the customer can get an answer back in 24 hours, right? So if there's a corrective action, some problem, it'll come in. They'll take their initial actions. They'll decide what they are, who should run it, and get the answer back right away. If there's a next stage of a project that needs to move on but can't, the project leader can come in and say, I need some resources on this, or this one department is got a bunch of stuff to do, it's not prioritized for mine, I'm not going to make my date, what can we do about it? So at the beginning of this 24-hour period, you have nothing, and at the end of it, they'll have 5, 10, sometimes 15 items to take care of. And then every day, the entire management team gets realigned about what the priorities are for that day or for that week, and the teams that are doing something get an answer, either go back and you didn't finish, or you have the other half of the checklist to do, or you have to do this section of work, or yes, go ahead, you have the money, go and do what you need to get things done. And so this, for us, has established a regular connection point for the entire organization. So some of the comments that I've gotten and were presented during the visit when ARPM brought the people there was that this one item, just having this meet on a regular basis, saved them from inventing new processes, missing steps in the process, and everybody knew what was going on across the whole organization that mattered in this factory, so that they all could answer things the same way as they walked down our business processes. So for us, this has set the pace in the organization to every day have an alignment and an action on activity. Okay, number 2 is on data, the main discussion point on our information flow. All of these processes, you can imagine, generate lots of information. In Trostel, we have organized the system because of our various quality requirements that we have to, from the final product, we have traceability all the way back to the original raw materials. So we can go from the parameters the performance parameters that we measure on the final batch of the rubber that's mixed, to what the mixing parameters were in the mixing, to the weight of the materials going in, to the raw material certs coming in, to the information of what supplier has it and what lot number was it. Okay, that's a lot of information that follows down this tree, and we have it all linked together. We can go all the way back. Okay, but that doesn't help. As what happened yesterday, for example, I got a note saying there are chunks of cured rubber in the batch, and so it failed the final performance test. And we say, well, that's great. Now, which one of these pieces of data is going to help us out? Right? Well, we know something happened in the mix because the raw materials went in okay. We can follow our data backwards for that. And so we have one more thing that was the interesting part that we're going to talk about the most here, and that is we have a video camera system in the factory. We have 16 cameras that are pointed at the critical operations. So they're pointed at it'll be pointed at the mill. It'll be pointed at the where they're loading the hopper to mix it. It's pointed at the end of the batch off where the rubber is coming off. And in fact, we have one pointed at the computer screen in front of the guy who's putting the stuff into the hopper, because he said that he put it in, and we said, well, no, the system told you to put something else in, and we didn't believe him. So we stuck a camera there, and so we can see exactly what he's seeing when he's doing when he's putting this stuff in. And by gosh, he was right. The system was wrong, and he would put exactly what it said to put in there, and it made a mess because when it came out the other side, we were pointing at him and found out that there was something wrong with that. The picture at the bottom up there is a small version. We'll look at a couple of videos here in a second. In the plant manager's office, in the supervisor area, and at each station there are also monitors. So each person at every location that has a camera can see what's going on at the locations nearby. So the guy that's up on the top floor of the mezzanine putting the stuff in can see if the guy at the blend mill is standing there ready to receive it when it drops out. The guy at the end of the batch off can see if the guy that's loading the conveyor at the top is doing something. We're actually going to see a little bit of that. And so we can watch this for up to 60 days. Right? So we have 60 days of history. We can go back. If a customer says, you sent us a barcode scanner along with that rubber, as we did one time, and they said, how did that barcode scanner get into my batch? And also, why didn't you notice you're missing a barcode scanner? So let's take a look at a couple of these, because these are sort of, there is, as you can imagine, there is a big safety capability that if you have cameras everywhere. First, you might wonder about, okay, we're a union shop, by the way, and so this is with the full permission of the union that we're doing this activity. You might wonder how people like having cameras pointed at them. It goes to this idea of having a culture of openness. So we never use the cameras to point the finger at somebody and say, you screwed this up. They already know they screwed it up because the barcode scanner got through there somehow, and so there was some interesting discussions with how the barcode scanner got on there. But what we use it for is for safety. If something bad happened, we can see exactly what happened. If it came out with chunks of cured rubber, we can see if the sequence varied, or we can see if there's something happened in the batch, it hung up for a period of time or something. And some of these are pointed in the warehouse. We can see, is there a dangerous practice in the warehouse? Is there mixing of materials and things like that? We actually go back and look and see what happened. But that won't work if you go to the individuals and blame them. So we never do. We assume they meant to do it right. It was something that we did wrong, that we either didn't give them the right tool for it. In fact, we can redo the green sheets from this morning because we went through a sequence of those things that might have happened that wasn't the guy's fault, and we can always seem to find something. Okay, on this one, so we have something called a batch off. That's where the rubber comes off the mill. I had my rubber friends are sitting more or less on this side, so I'm not going to look that way when I'm talking. So the rubber comes off, and it has a dip and a drying process it goes through, and then up onto a conveyor. So what we're going to see is a picture of the guy on the right side here. He's got a steel hook. Now we're going to have to play this again because let me signal you next time to start it. So the operator's on the right side. He's got a conveyor belt running. It's going into a cutter. So there's a roller first. There's a gray magnetic detector, and then at the far end there's a chopper. He picks it up with a steel bar. He's working on it. His steel bar gets caught on the conveyor and almost pulls his arm down the line, right underneath this. Now there's a bunch of bad things we can take from this. The guy that comes up the stairs is the guy that had to shut this machine off. So item number one is this was a relatively new operator, just finished training. You would think that this guy would have known to press the emergency stop button so when he sent a 1/4-inch piece of steel down the line and had it drop into this guy's into the bin at the end. But he didn't. He just stepped back and said, please, what should I do? And the other guy who was down at the bottom with the camera, with the screen, saw him and came up and shut the machine off for him. Now the good thing is he let go of this steel bar that he was holding onto when it hooked on the edge of the conveyor. The metal detector detected the steel bar, and then you'll see the chopper actuate and actually chopped it in half before it got to the end. So the chopper was enough to cut this. It could have cut the guy's arm off, of course, for this. So we have done a couple of things, the first one of which is that we've made that roller that's right at the beginning. It now has a height sensor on it, so if somebody's arm goes into it, it stops the entire machine, so nothing else keeps moving downstream on this thing. The other was that we had more training for the operator, and we made the e-stops, the emergency stops, much more prominent on this thing and put them closer to where the operator is. So if he's caught, he can actually shut it off with some other part of his body if he has to. And the other is that the guy down below is a sort of a backup person watching this activity. Okay, let's look at the second one. Now, in this one, this is out in our warehouse. This is that first one was how do you get metal in your batch. This one is, if you look near the top here, you'll see this is a 2-story tall. We have 5 rack spaces, and this fork truck is working on the fourth one up, and he's trying to pick up the pallet on the fourth rack, and there's some guys at the bottom that are working on this, and they're not sort of paying a lot of attention to what's going on. And you'll notice all of a sudden it jumps up, and the pallet on the very top goes up too. We don't move two pallets at the same time ever, so this was not the intended thing. Now, cleverly, he actually tries to take his pallet off, and then the other guys notice and say, hey, don't do that, push it back, at which time they notice that the top one actually was attached to it and almost fell on top of the whole crowd, and then they all ran away and abandoned ship and got the heck out of there. Okay, which is probably the best thing that they can do is get the heck out of the way for that. So this one had a bunch of good things. The biggest issue here wasn't that the guy did anything wrong. In fact, this camera had the best view of what was happening. Those guys didn't. So we've now installed a camera at the top of the mast of that so he can watch. He has a screen in his fork truck cab so they can watch what's happening. There's also stay away 15 feet signs pasted all over the outside of this fork truck for this thing. And they've now had situational awareness that nobody can be working near a fork truck that's working on these racks. And the last thing was we took the rack spacing and we made it so that that particular fork truck can no longer reach the pallet above, and so that so this incident doesn't happen anymore. Although we do have another video of them pushing one pallet right through the rack out the other side, which is one that Troy saw when they were on the trip. So we have used these cameras. We are freely using these, and we have the full cooperation because these are all treated as training opportunities for these guys, or for identifying, like the barcode scanner we discovered had nothing to do with the person. The barcode scanner fell into the batch because one of the bales that was sitting on the belt hit the edge of the barcode scanner, which was lying just off the belt, but protruding a little bit. Just clipped it as it went by, and it fell on, and they all went into the mix together. And so we were able to exactly see, and the operator's back was turned because he was loading the next batch on. He never saw it go down the line when it happened. And so we showed that to the customer. The customer said, that's pretty funny. Thank you very much. Please send me a new batch. I won't dock you for my downtime because your story was so good that you told me. And you're the only person that's ever shown me video of the thing happening that caused the problem. They really believed us at that time. Okay, so the results for Trostel. So we have seen systematic improvements in the results of Trostel over time with many of the things that we're doing. The two that are attributed to having the most impact by the people in the factory are these two items. One is the ability to go back 60 days and see what actually happened for something, right? And the other is the ability that we are measuring ourselves, and then we have the data available, and we have everybody operating sort of to the same steps and the same processes so they can know exactly where in the process they are at any one time. So our OEE, if you're not too familiar with that, it's unfortunate we can't have the third speaker because we use that as our standard measurement for equipment. It's equipment uptime and how many good parts it makes. That's been systematically getting better. It's near a sort of a world-class standard now. And we've had systematic improvements in complaint trends from customers and from non-conforming batches and things like that because we've been adding these tools. Now, it's not to say we're perfect. It's one of our scorecards in the lower left for the factory. Red to us, or green are places where we're meeting our requirements. Red is the places where, not that we failed our targets, because we don't talk about failures because that implies somebody's to blame. These are the areas where we know we have to improve to get closer to what we want to be as we go through our journey of continuously improving things. So I leave you with three sort of thoughts on this. One is that you want to work with information and data. It's very bad to get a bunch of people in the room, especially our group of managers, and just have them talk opinion to each other. So if they come into one of these CMT meetings and there's no data there, they can't talk about that item. They make the project leader go back and come and bring it back. The fact that they meet every day keeps everything moving. All the processes that they do, these guys are aligned with, they know, and there's a reaction on a 24-hour basis if needed for whatever activity they're working on. And you have to be open, or a union shop especially won't let you have cameras pointed right in the face of the poor operator and as he's working, and he's perfectly okay with it. Thank you, that's all I have.